Rain pattered softly against the window of the small Baltimore diner, tracing lazy lines down the fogged glass as warm light flickered inside. Amara sat on the cracked leather booth seat, a paper crown tilted on her head, her round cheeks glowing. With joy, she was 9 today, a kind, bubbly Nigerian-American girl who found wonder in everything, even in the modest birthday cake her mother, Kioma, had brought in a foil-covered container. It wasn't store-bought, and there were only 3 candles, but Amara didn't mind. She had her mother beside her, tired-eyed but smiling, wearing scrubs stained with the invisible weight of 2 nursing jobs. The air smelled of syrup and coffee, and Kioma hummed Happy Birthday with weary love, her voice breaking ever so slightly on the last note. Amara closed her eyes, took a breath, and leaned forward to blow out the candles, but then stopped. Her gaze shifted beyond the flickering flames to the window. Outside, in the grey mist of the rain, stood a boy, thin, damp, his eyes wide and unblinking as he stared at the cake. He wore a threadbare hoodie, too small for his frame, hands shoved deep in his pockets, lips slightly parted. Amara blinked. Then, without a word, she slid off the booth, her sneakers squeaking slightly, and walked out into the drizzle. Turned, startled, but didn't call after her. She watched. Amara approached the boy with her plate in hand, a slice of cake wobbling gently in the center. "It's my birthday," she said simply, holding it out. "You should have some too." The boy's eyes flicked from her face to the cake and back again. His lips quivered. Slowly, almost reverently, he reached for it. Rain mixed with tears as he took a bite, eyes fluttering shut. "No one's ever shared their birthday with me before," he whispered. Kioma stood at the door now, one hand to her chest, breath catching at the scene. The boy looked up once more, then turned and ran, disappeared down the alley and into the grey. Amara never saw him again, but something in her heart, and her mother's, changed forever. 15 years had passed since that rainy birthday in the diner, but the image of the boy in the hoodie, shivering and wide-eyed, never left Amara, now 24. She moved through life with that same instinctive kindness, though the world often met it with indifference. A recent journalism graduate with honors, Amara had once dreamed of becoming a reporter who told stories that mattered, stories that changed people. But those dreams had thinned under the harsh fluorescent lights of a local Baltimore lifestyle magazine, where she now worked as a junior content producer. Most days, she rewrote celebrity gossip or compiled clickbait listicles under tight deadlines. Her passion projects carefully crafted profiles of shelter residents and overlooked neighbors remained tucked in a notebook at the bottom of her satchel, read by no one but herself. Her editor, Monique, a sharp-eyed woman who wore ambition, like armor, had recently delivered a blow Amara still hadn't recovered from. "You're too soft," Monique said, lips pursed. "This industry needs teeth. Think headlines, not heartstrings." The words rang in Amara's ears long after the meeting ended. She hadn't expected the promotion, not really, but it still stung. The quiet dismissal, the implication that empathy had no place in real journalism. Outside of work, Amara's life was a careful balance of survival and caretaking. Her mother, Kioma, had retired early due to worsening complications from diabetes. The same woman who once juggled double shifts and still found time to braid. Amara's hair was now homebound, her energy fading faster each day. Their small apartment buzzed with the hum of medical devices and the quiet anxiety of overdue bills. Amara managed the household groceries, medications, insurance calls, all while keeping up the appearance of stability. She never complained, never asked for help. Every Thursday evening, after work, she would walk 5 blocks to the downtown shelter. There, she shed her deadlines and dull office voice and listened. She listened to veterans with trembling hands, women escaping violence, teenagers trying to rewrite their narratives. She filled pages in her notebook with their voices, poetic, raw, full of hope and heartbreak. She never published them. They were her quiet rebellion against a world that wanted scandal, not sincerity. Her friends, the few she still had time for, admired her heart but worried for her future. "You're burning out," one said. "You can't pour from an empty cup." But Amara always shook her head. Her cup had cracks, yes, but she poured anyway. Because somewhere inside her, the girl who once gave her birthday cake to a stranger still believed that small kindnesses could ripple outward. And maybe, just maybe, the boy she never saw again had found warmth in that slice, enough to carry him through, enough to remind her, when the world felt hollow, that there was still something worth writing about. The shelter buzzed with its usual quiet rhythm, folding chairs, warm soup, and soft conversations blending into the background hum of resilience. Amara was seated at a folding table, jotting down notes in the corner, listening to an elderly man describe his time in the Navy. When the director's voice cut through the room, "Everyone, meet our newest volunteer, Jacob Morgan." She looked up absently, only half listening, until her eyes landed on the man stepping forward. He was tall, mid-20s, with kind eyes and a slight limp that didn't seem to slow his confident stride. The director beamed. "Jacob's the founder of Second Start, that new initiative helping youth transition out of homelessness. He's here to observe and connect with our community." Amara offered a polite smile, then returned to her notebook. She was used to enthusiastic do-gooders who came and went. But Jacob lingered throughout the evening, serving meals, speaking with quiet empathy, noticing people the way she tried to. There was something familiar about the way he listened, how gently he spoke. As the shift wrapped up and volunteers began packing up, Jacob approached her. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but charged with something else. "Can I ask you something strange?" Amara looked up, brows raised. "Sure," he hesitated, then asked, "Did you once give a piece of birthday cake to a cold, hungry boy outside a diner in the rain?" The world seemed to pause. The question landed like a whisper from the past, and Amara froze, her breath catching. "That was you," she said softly, stunned. He nodded. "I never forgot your face, or your name. It saved me." Her mouth parted in disbelief as he explained how that small act had given him his first glimpse of hope. At the time, he'd been slipping between shelters, barely surviving. "I remember sitting on the curb that night after you left, holding that piece of cake like it was a treasure. I didn't even know kindness like that existed." He went on to share how he fought to get out of the system, how he studied relentlessly, won a scholarship, and dedicated his life to building something that might give others the same second chance. "I've been looking for you for years," he said. Amara felt her heart thudding, not from shock, but something deeper, quiet awe. The realization that something she did at 9 years old had echoed through someone else's entire life. She looked at him, tears brimming. "I always wondered what happened to you." Jacob smiled, eyes gentle but fierce. "You happened to me, and I never stopped carrying it." Amara sat at the edge of her bed, Kioma's soft breathing echoing. From the next room, the weight of Jacob's offer circling her thoughts like a restless tide. He had asked her to help build the media arm of his foundation, to tell real stories, the kind that changed lives, not headlines. It was everything she'd ever wanted: purpose, heart, impact. But reality pressed in. Kioma's medication list was growing. Rent was overdue. Her paycheck from the magazine, however meager, was predictable safe. When she told Monique about the offer, half hoping for support, her editor's reaction was cold and cutting. From homeless to hero, that cliché, clickbait, leave, fairy tales to YouTube. The words stung more than Amara expected, each syllable dismissing not just Jacob's story, but hers. Still, something inside her shifted. One quiet evening, She sat beside Jacob at the shelter and began recording his memories, not for her magazine, but for the newsletter, just to honor the story. He spoke with humility, never casting himself as a savior, always crediting those who gave him a chance. Amara found herself writing with a fire she hadn't felt in years. But when the newsletter draft accidentally reached Monique through a staff member, the backlash was swift. Monique accused her of journalistic compromise, called her emotionally compromised, and suspended her indefinitely. The humiliation clung like damp clothes. Unemployed, Amara returned home that night to find Kioma weak from a sugar crash, too proud to have called for help. The hospital bills from the last ER visit sat unopened on the kitchen table. Panic swelled in Amara's chest. When Jacob heard what happened, he didn't hesitate. "Let me help," he said gently, offering to cover Kioma's medical expenses and more. But Amara recoiled, her voice trembling with pride and shame. "You needed dignity when I gave you that cake. Let me keep mine too." He didn't argue, just looked at her, with the same quiet understanding from years ago. Later that night, as Amara helped Kioma into bed, her mother reached for her hand and said, "I gave you kindness. You gave him kindness. Now let him give it back." Amara sat in silence long after her mother fell asleep, heart torn. She'd built her identity on giving, on standing strong despite struggle. But now, facing the limits of that strength, she was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Refusing help didn't make her noble. It just made her alone. The ballroom shimmered with gold and soft jazz, as guests in gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne, unaware that the keynote speaker had just pulled out. Backstage, panic stirred. Jacob, eyes scanning the crowd, turned to Amara, urgency in his voice. "Will you speak?" She blinked. "Me. No one can tell the story better." Her heart pounded. She wasn't ready, hadn't written a word, but something in Jacob's eyes told her this moment was bigger than fear. Minutes later, she stood under the warm lights, palms sweating against the mic, facing hundreds of expectant faces. She began softly, recalling the rain that tapped the diner window, the boy outside with eyes to hollow for childhood, and the slice of cake that crossed the barrier between strangers. "That day wasn't extraordinary," she said, voice steadying. "It was a small act from a small girl. But that boy," he remembered. She spoke of how kindness can echo, how it followed him through foster homes and sleepless nights, pushing him forward, and how it eventually brought him back. We don't always get to see the impact of our smallest moments, but sometimes we do. The crowd was silent, still. Some dabbed at their eyes. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not polite, but reverent. Jacob stood first, clapping until others followed. It felt less like a performance and more like a recognition. By morning, her speech had gone viral, clips shared by influencers, non-profits, even journalists who once ignored her. Jacob's foundation saw a flood of new donations. Emails poured into Amara's inbox, speaking offers, interview requests, collaborations. Even Monique reached out with a stilted apology and an offer to return. Amara declined with quiet grace. That chapter was closed. After the gala, Jacob found her beneath the soft lights of the garden terrace. "You didn't just give me cake," he said, voice low. "You gave me my first story. Let's write the next one together." Amara smiled, moved beyond words, and kissed him gently on the cheek, not out of romance, but reverence, respect, healing, a full circle sealed not by spectacle but by soul. Amara stood in her new office, modest, sunlit, lined with handwritten letters from youth whose stories she had helped share. As head of storytelling and outreach for Jacob's Foundation, her days were filled with purpose. She no longer wrote for clicks, but for change. Her articles, once buried in the back pages, now headlined national platforms, sparking policy discussions and inspiring donations. Kioma, now with a proper in-home nurse and stable medication, had regained her strength and her laughter. When Amara learned the care was funded by a legacy scholarship from the foundation, named in her honor, she confronted Jacob, who only smiled. "You wouldn't have accepted it any other way," he said. Amara had found a rhythm. Mornings, writing, afternoons, mentoring kids at the shelter, evenings, reading aloud to her mother. Her voice had finally become a bridge, not only between past and present, but between stories and the people who needed them. One Thursday, during a writing session at the shelter, she noticed a little girl offer her cupcake to a boy crying in the corner. No hesitation, no fear, just instinctive kindness. Amara's breath caught. The sight pulled something tender from her, the memory of rain against diner glass and a boy's trembling hands. "It's still happening," she whispered, smiling through tears. Kindness had come full circle, not through grand gestures, but through small, human moments that rippled outward. Her heart, once tired from chasing meaning, now beat steady with the quiet joy of purpose, fulfilled. The afternoon sunlight filtered softly through the tree branches, lining the sidewalk outside the familiar old diner, casting, shifting, golden patterns on the worn pavement, as if time itself had paused to witness something sacred. Amara sat quietly at the same rusted iron table she and her mother had once chosen all those years ago, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze turned inward as much as outward. Next to her, Jacob smiled gently as he placed the chocolate birthday cake on the table, its top glistening with a fresh layer of frosting, small candy stars twinkling across its surface like tiny constellations. The cake wasn't for her this time, was for the kids from the shelter. Kids who had seen too much of the world's harshness too soon. Kids whose eyes held both the fear of abandonment and the quiet longing for sweetness, stability, and someone to see them. Amara watched them as they played nearby, chasing soap bubbles and laughter with equal determination, their voices rising in sharp, joyful bursts that made her chest ache in a way that wasn't painful but profound, like her soul recognizing something it had always hoped could be true. The shelter van was parked down the block, and a few of the staff leaned against it, sipping iced tea and letting the moment unfold without interfering. It was a moment no one wanted to rush. Jacob pulled a small box of matches from his jacket pocket and struck one with a gentle scrape. The flame flared briefly before he tilted it toward the single candle in the middle of the cake. The wick caught, a tiny fire flickering with purpose in the afternoon breeze. They didn't speak at first. Instead, Amara closed her eyes, and Jacob followed her lead. For a heartbeat or maybe longer, there was only stillness between them. The quiet understanding of two people who had passed through different storms and somehow met again on the shore. Then, in a voice so soft it barely reached over the sound of children laughing, Amara said, "To those who give," her words a kind of prayer, a benediction of gratitude for those who had given her strength when she had none left. Jacob added, "And those who grow," his voice steady but threaded with emotion, with all the weight of the boy who once stood shivering outside this very window, watching another child celebrate a birthday he could never imagine being his own. Amara remembered that day as clearly as if it were happening now, the way the rain had clung to the glass, the way her mother's hand had rested lightly on her back, the exact expression on the boy's face when she had offered him a slice of her cake, not out of pity, but instinct, a reflexive kindness born of love and joy, because no one should be forgotten on someone else's celebration. She hadn't known then that such a small act would echo for years. She hadn't known she was planting the seed of a future she would one day walk inside, but here it was, blossoming in real time. Her fingers brushed against the cake box as she leaned forward to straighten the candle, and the sensation made her blink rapidly. The flame reflected in her eyes like a mirror, a reminder of all the stories she had written since, about pain, about hope, about people who were never supposed to matter but who changed the world anyway. After the gala, after the viral speech, after Monique's failed attempt to rehire her, after Jacob's gentle insistence that they build something bigger together, after all of that, she had found something deeper than success. She had found purpose. She had found herself. The cake was a symbol, yes, but it was also a promise. That small things still mattered. That softness still had a place in a world sharpened by cynicism. The children began to circle back toward the table now, drawn by the scent of frosting and the flicker of the candle. One little girl, no more than 6, with tight curls and bright green barrettes, tugged gently on Amara's sleeve. "Is it someone's birthday?" she asked, eyes wide with anticipation. Amara smiled and said, "It's everyone's birthday today." The girl's face lit up with a joy so pure it made Jacob chuckle under his breath. He handed her the plastic knife to make the first cut, and she did so with the concentration of someone performing a sacred ritual. The cake was passed around, in wobbly slices, fingers sticky, napkins forgotten, faces smudged with chocolate, and grins. Jacob leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head, just watching, not needing to say anything, not needing to move. He had once told Amara. She gave him his first story. That single moment outside this diner had given him a reason to keep going. But the truth, Amara thought now, was that they had given each other something equally profound: belief in the power of kindness, in the idea that care was not a transaction, but a kind of light, in the possibility that life could still surprise you, even after you thought all the chapters had been written. The sun had started to dip lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. One of the shelter staff began taking photos, capturing the chaos and delight of frosting-streaked cheeks and mid-air laughter. Amara watched it all unfold like a film she didn't realize she'd always wanted to see. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the muscle and memory, something settled. Not closure, exactly, but clarity. She thought of her mother, now resting more easily at home with better care. She thought of the countless names she'd written into her stories: Sandhoused veterans, working mothers, queer teens, aging grandmothers, every soul with a weight and a wish, none of them asking to be saved, just to be seen. And she thought, too, of the quiet resilience of kindness, the way it moved through the world like water, finding cracks and filling them, softening what had been hardened by time and cruelty. Her voice would carry further now, through articles and essays and campaigns. But in the end, this is what she wanted most: a moment like this, joy that didn't have to shout, love that didn't need an audience, the simple, extraordinary miracle of being alive, together, and good to one another. As the kids finished their cake and darted off again, chasing bubbles and sunlight, Amara glanced at Jacob and said, "You know, I think we're going to be okay." He didn't respond right away, just nodded, eyes on the horizon. The candle had long since burned out, but its warmth lingered. The camera teeth there had been one would have slowly zoomed out now, lifting above the sidewalk and the street and the diner with its chipped red awning, capturing the full expanse of what had been made new. In the distance, city sounds carried, unoblivious and unchanged. But here, in this small pocket of time, something had shifted, a beginning born from an ending, a thread stitched tightly between past and present, a single act of kindness that had refused to vanish. A voice Samariz echoed one last time, not to the world, but into it, quiet and steady like a heartbeat. A single slice can change a life, but kindness, that changes everything. And as the shadows stretched longer, and the cake was reduced to crumbs in memory, the world kept spinning, just a little softer than before.